Here's a quick and easy way for businesses to generate thousands of dollars of revenue from old contacts and customers who are much easier to convert than trying to expensively advertise to new leads. The method is called a database reactivation, and in this video I'm going to talk through two things. Firstly, what is a database reactivation and what exactly does it entail? And then secondly, I'm going to give you guys a full tutorial of a build that I created for this system, which you can walk through and learn exactly what I've done and how you can implement this method yourselves. Or if you want to avoid working from scratch, then feel free to comment the word database below and I will send you across the GoHighLevel template. So then all you need to do is make a few tweaks to make it specific to your business. So without further ado, let's get into it. The problem is that most businesses are spending thousands on ads and SEO, essentially trying to attract strangers. And the real goldmine is the hundreds of contacts that they have in their database, which they're just sitting on and have no systematic way of following up with them. Now, these guys aren't cold leads. They're warm contacts who trusted your service enough to either reach out or work with you in the past. And so this forgotten database is the real avenue to win some more jobs quite easily. But how can you actually win them back? Step one is segmenting your database. And the reason we do this is so that we can send personalized messages to each of the segments that actually get response rates rather than just sending generic slop. And I've shown some examples on screen as to how you could segment your database. It could be by last service date. Did you serve your customer 3 months ago or over a year ago? It could be the type of service, because you have potentially particular seasonal discounts that you want to offer for one service, or annual memberships that only apply to a particular service. And then there's also customer experience. Did your past contact have a positive, negative, or neutral experience? All of these segments have very different messaging that you want to use for each group. Step two is to have a system that can not only do outreach to all of your segmented past contacts at scale, but also follow up automatically if they don't respond. Because we find that for a lot of contacts, it takes more than one email to get them back on the hook. We space out our emails to give the contact a chance to respond and stop after 3 follow-ups because we don't want to harass our customers. But instead of forgetting about them forever, what we do is remove these contacts from our active reactivation campaign and add them to future campaigns, whether that be our mailing and marketing list or other database reactivation campaigns we run again a bit later down the line. So they can still expect to hear from us when the timing might be a little bit better. And when it comes to the important emails themselves, there's 2 things that are worth noting. One is how we personalize them based on the information that we have in our database, as you can see here. And the second is how we try different angles for each email, because one of them might resonate with our potential contact a bit more than another. So in this example, in email angle 1, it's just a check-in. Angle 2 could be an education piece, and then angle 3 could be angled at more of a price discount. Finally, step 3 is having a system which can handle responses automatically and push interested contacts towards booking a job. To do this, we use an AI reply handler which can handle replies at any of the stages, which categorizes the intent of the response. Is the contact asking us a question back, or are they interested in moving forwards and booking a job? And the AI agent then handles the responses accordingly. Now, the benefit of using an AI agent is that it can respond in minutes, where interest from the contact is highest, which we find best improves the likelihood of booking the job. So I wanted to show you guys live what segmenting a database actually entails. And to do that, I have generated a bunch of dummy contact information using AI, specifically Claude. And that's why you see a bunch of fakemail.com domains. But I've asked it to specifically generate first name, last name, email, last service date, and the last service performed. Now, in terms of the data that could be extracted from your database, it really depends on the information that you have available. The more information you have on each of your past contacts, the more segmenting, personalization, better chance of response rates that you can get. And then on top of that, where you're actually sourcing the data from can help with some of the filtering process. Is your source a spreadsheet or Airtable, or is it in a CRM? So with mine, The niche that I'm targeting is HVAC, and for those of you that aren't familiar with the abbreviation, HVAC is heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. It's more prevalent in the US given their weather than where I'm at in the UK. And in terms of how I'd want to segment my database for this reactivation campaign, let's say my offer is an annual tune-up for a system that I've implemented for the contact in the past. So the first thing that I'm interested in is, when did I actually last provide the service? You know, because if I provided the service a month ago, and especially let's say if it was an annual tune-up, say 3 months ago, it'd be quite unprofessional if I was then reaching out with an email, you know, in sub a year saying, oh, it's been a while, you know, do you want your annual tune-up? It'll probably only serve to annoy the contact. So looking at my data here, I can clearly see that for Sarah Williams, the last service date was Jan 2026, so earlier this year. So she's someone that I wouldn't want to include in this database reactivation campaign. Now, on top of that, perhaps the actual service that I provided is of relevance too. And in my example, let's say emergency repairs aren't the best avenue to target annual tune-ups. It's likely that someone else is performing an annual tune-up already, and perhaps even if I did want to go down the annual tune-up route, I might want to have different messaging for those people that I did an emergency repair for. So let's say I also do not want to include them. And then finally, for the people where we never provided a service, an annual tune-up probably isn't the right route to go down in terms of really hitting what's relevant for those contacts. The first kind of angle that we want to ask them is, did you end up going ahead with X service that you reached out to us for? Because these are your guys where they inquired, you likely provided a quote, but it didn't convert. And just because it didn't convert doesn't mean they went ahead with the service. So the first port of call for us is to actually just check back in with them and see if they still need that service before we offer an annual tune-up. So for David Chen and Amanda Brown, this also applies to them. So these are the contacts that I want to remove as part of segmenting my database, and all of the remainder I want to target with this reactivation campaign. Now, in terms of filtering this, there's a number of ways you could go about it. Firstly, you can manually go through the contacts and delete them row by row if they're not relevant. But of course, that's not an efficient way to go about this, especially if your database is way larger. And that's what I expect. I expect some of you guys watching this to have hundreds of contacts, maybe even thousands. So we want an efficient way to do this. And this goes back to, where is your data actually kept? If it's on the likes of spreadsheets, then you can use filtering in the columns for those contacts where you've provided a particular service, or you only want it to apply if it's prior to a last service date. In some CRMs, you can do some filtering as well. And thirdly, another route you can go down is actually using AI to do the filtering for you. So what you do in this case is download the CSV. You would upload it then to Claude, ChatGPT, one of those LLMs, and then you'd basically describe what filtering that you want to take place. So for me, I want it to be last service date over a year ago, and I don't want it to be XYZ services performed. And then you also ask it to output the filtered contacts as a new CSV, and then AI can do it for you in that regard. Now, given that I'm not working with many contacts, what I'm just going to do is just manually delete them, because it's quick and easy as part of this demo. There we go. And now I have my segmented database. So in terms of actually building the automation workflow, there's several platforms that you can go about doing this. You could use NAN, Make.com, Zapier, but in this example, I'm using GoHighLevel. And the reason I'm using GoHighLevel is it integrates well with a bunch of different automation tasks. So it's quite a nice combined tool. But on top of that, in terms of aesthetically and showing you guys as part of this demo, it's quite clear and obvious to follow. So after creating an account, and you can get a free trial for 14 days, or if you look on YouTube, not that hard really, you can find different content creators who are providing like a 31-day free trial. So do have a go at that. And once you're in GoHighLevel, it will give you this agency view, which is the default view. But really you want to go to your actual individual company. So to create a sub account for your company, you want to go to the sub accounts tab of GoHighLevel and then create sub account in the top right. You can use a blank snapshot, enter your location and your relevant company details after that, and then click save. So let's say I go to TAM, and where I want to go in this left panel here is the contact section. Now here in the contact section, of course, you can add each contact one by one, but that's a very tedious, time-consuming process. Instead, what you can do is use this import button here. So I'm looking to import contacts, and if I click next in the bottom here and upload the relevant file, then click next. And you can see here that GoHighLevel is giving us the option to map each of the columns in the spreadsheet to the relevant categories. So the map columns, we've already got first name, fine, last name, happy with that, email, last service date, last service performed. And you'll also see this tag section. So if I go back here and I unhide one of the columns, I've also created tags which has got past customer and overdue maintenance. And this was basically a fourth method of going about filtering which of your contacts get the email as part of the database reactivation campaign. So I'm happy with all of the mapping, so I'm going to click next. But of course, if you want to change any of the mappings, then you can do so here. Add fields as necessary. And if you wanted to add new fields, you go to settings, custom fields. And if I move myself down here, create field, and then boom, complete this, and then that's a new field created. Now let's go back to our contacts. And we were at this stage, so I'm going to click next. I tick this box at the bottom. All contacts in this import have consented to hear from us. This box at the bottom specifically says about whether you've contacted your contacts in the last past year, and outreach to contacts where it's been more than a year really depends on your jurisdiction. So for instance, in the US, the regulation is a lot more lax than in the UK, and how you actually handle outreach is the key important thing rather than you not actually being able to do it. So if I click start import and I select go to contacts now, so this bulk action is being worked on. I can see this here. So bulk actions, segmented database contact, processing at 0%. So I'll give it a bit of time. If we refresh now, we should all have our list of contacts. So as you can see, we've got the contact names, the emails, when they were created at, tags, but we can see that there's a few fields that we included that are missing here. And in order to make them visible, we can go to this manage fields section here. So we didn't have any information for phone, business name, last activity, but we did have fields for last service date and I believe it was system last service performed. So let's apply. See what comes up. Yeah, and as we can see, we've now got the last service date and the last service performed. So now that we've imported our contacts, we then go on to the actual workflow building phase for the automation itself. So I'm going to go to the automation tab on the side here, press create workflow, start from scratch, enable autosave, and you can use this AI tool here to help you describe and build the workflow, but this is in beta phase, and because I want you guys to actually understand what's underneath the hood, I'm going to go module by module and essentially explain what I'm thinking about and some of the inputs that I'm using. So a trigger is what do you want to actually start the workflow? And let's say the sequence starts when a tag is added. So we have the workflow trigger here, which is contact tag. You can name it whatever you like. And I find when creating workflows, it's useful if you label each of the steps to make it very clear what each one does. That way, if something goes wrong or you need to make any amendments or change a particular part of the workflow, it's very quick and easy to identify which part of the workflow to update. So now I'm going to add a filter for what I actually want the contact tag to be. So in terms of the custom fields, let's say reactivation status, and I want the reactivation status to be sequence active. Click save. Now me having the field reactivation status and having the option to select sequence active, where I could have selected a bunch of these other reactivation statuses, that's something that you'll need to set up manually. So I'm going to go back to a section that we've already visited before. So if I go to settings here and I then go to custom fields, again, you're creating the relevant field that you need, you enter in the name, folder name, etc. Instead of the field type being a single line, you want to change it to drop down, and then drop down will give you an option for option A, and then I can add another option B, C, etc. So in my example, it was sequence active, perhaps they've opted out. These are all the kind of different reactivation statuses that you could have. So for mine, the stages that I had as part of reactivation status was not started, sequence active, replied, i.e. the contact is replied, the contact is booked. One, I guess that's pretty similar to booked, no response, and opted out. Back to my workflow, I'm going to rename it HVAC Reactivation Campaign. What I'm going to show you with this workflow is the simplified version. You could have or include the likes of opportunities where it makes it easier to see each contact and where every single one has got to and what particular stage that they're at. But to keep this simple, I'm going to do the bare bones version of the database reactivation campaign. And then things like opportunities is something that you could expand upon this bare bones version that I'm going to talk through now. So once the trigger has been hit, the first thing we want to do is send that contact an email. So I have in mind HVAC. The from email I've left blank. So you can set up your own domain and attach this to GoHighLevel. That's probably a separate video, so I'd look online as exactly what you need to do there. The thing about moving your domain to GoHighLevel is it changes or requires you to change some of the sending properties. So you need to do that correctly in order to ensure your deliverability is optimized, which is essentially the likelihood that your outbound email actually lands in the inbox of the person that you want and not just go straight into the spam folder. So I won't go into that, but in terms of the subject can just be quick check-in. And as you can see, I've worked on this automation before. That's why it's given me some options to pre-fill. So for the most part, I will use them, but for you guys that are doing this fresh, unless you're using the template from myself or someone else, you'll need to enter this in manually. And then I'm going to show you the start of the email and how you actually put in a variable, which is where the personalization angle comes in. So let's say I want the first name of the person who I'm looking to outreach to. So remember the contacts list that I had, it was that column of first names. So I'd say, hi, use this area here, which is custom values. Now I want the contact and their first name. And that's pulled through this variable, as you can see on screen. Now, you can also type this in manually. If I type in the squiggly brackets, I don't actually know what the name for those are. And as you can see, it also pulls through the variable. So 2 options for you to go about doing it there. And now I'm going to copy in my copy that I was using before. So you guys don't need to see me type this out. And let me change the fonts so they're all the same. So this is Verdana, one Arial 14 point. And the fact that this brackets are no longer highlighted suggests to me that the variable is no longer pulling through since I changed it. So I'm just going to do that again. Okay, and the action name is email angle 1. I'm going to change last service your system, make it even more specific. So last service performed is an annual tune-up. And the reason I've done this is after looking at my database, if I want to refer back to the actual service provided for the annual tune-up, I want to say an annual tune-up. For the filter replacement and duct cleaning in particular, that's potentially something where I wouldn't be reaching out with the annual tune-up offer. So potentially something that I should have segmented originally, but I didn't, so it's fine. We can just do it here. So I was going through our records and noticed we last serviced your system. So I want to make it a bit more specific than that for personalization. Did an not contact, added a tag, and I'm going down to, actually, yeah, it would be part of the contact. Custom fields right at the bottom. It's the last service performed. Back in last service date. Just wanted to check in and see if everything's still running okay. And then we go on to basically say we note the season's changing. It's worth making sure things are in good shape before your system works harder. Okay, so I don't love this final paragraph here, and I'm going to adjust the copy. I don't like the copy is it feels a bit too passive, you know, like let me know and I can get one of our techs out to take a look. Yes, you know, it's nice to have your system working all in order and everything, but unless there's a sense of greater urgency or importance as to why, it's less likely to convert. So I'm going to change it to something like most of our once a year before summer kicks in. So I'm making it season specific just to keep everything running smoothly, and this is where the sense of urgency comes in. Catch anything small before it becomes expensive. If anything's been a little off lately, so I'm using a little off, making it a bit more conversational, weird noises, uneven temps, higher bills, that's usually a sign it's overdue. So I'm really liken them to what the potential problems could be and how that indicates it's overdue. Either way, want me to get you on the schedule for a tune-up. Cool. So that's our email angle 1. We're going to select wait, and it's until the contact replies. So in response to email angle 1. And we want this timeout because what happens if the contact doesn't reply? We want this to be, let's give them 3 days. So change this to wait 3 days. And if I save the action, we now have 2 options below for where this workflow can go. Now, if we want contact has replied, we want to be aware of that. So this is where tagging really comes in useful. So if I search add contact tag, select tags, and I want to select reactivation replied, and I'll change this to add replied tag. Beautiful. And then I can leave it there. Now, the importance of adding this replied tag is we can use that to trigger a separate automation workflow, and that's actually going to be our response handler. So I won't go into that yet until we finish this workflow, but now you understand the rationale as to why the tagging is important. So what happens if the contact doesn't respond? Then we want to try a second angle of email. So in terms of creating the second email, to avoid having to input all of the same inputs we used before, you can click these 3 dots here, and there's 2 options. One, to copy the particular action that you're selecting, or secondly, you can copy all actions from here. And I'm actually going to select copy all actions from here because all of this will be relevant in the second to third follow-up bridge. And if that doesn't make sense, I'll show you now. So when I clicked plus, on the right hand side, there is the option to paste below. And as you can see, it's copied the whole of that workflow onwards. Now there's a few changes I want to, of course, make. I want to change this to email angle 2. The subject will be this. HVAC system might be costing you more than it should. I want to this in here. I'll go into it a bit later, but there is a real intention behind trying these different angles, and I'll explain at the end as to why. So I'll extend this and give you guys a quick option to pause and look at what I've written here. Great. And then I want to give the contact a bit more time to respond after the second email. So I'm going to change this to 5 days. And as you can see, timeout, what will happen after 5 days, contact reply, and we add the reply tag. Now, again, once more, I'm going to click the 3 dots, select copy all actions from here, paste this below, change this to email angle 3, and I'll change the copy at the end, and then I want to change this to 10 days. Change the action name to 10 days as well, so it's all very clear. Now what I want to happen if they don't respond after the 3rd email is slightly different. We don't want to spam our customers, basically annoy them. 3 follow-ups is reasonable, and if they don't respond in that time, then we should remove them from the reactivation campaign. But that doesn't mean, as I explained before, that we stop contacting them, because we can add them to marketing, mailing lists, or future reactivation campaigns. So what I want to do now is remove the contact tag, and I am removing the reactivation sequence inactive. So remove reactivation active tag. Sweet. So that's it, which is fairly simple. But as you can see, we try email angle 1. If they respond, then they go into our response handler. If they don't, then they get a follow-up. Same process again, response handler or follow-up, and then response handler or remove from sequence. The one thing that I haven't covered, which is worth noting, and I've updated this off screen so you don't need to watch me type all of this out, is the email angles themselves. And what's really important about the follow-ups, but also the email angles is two things. One, the reason we follow up is an email can land in someone's inbox at any time, and it might be a really unideal time. So by following up, it increases the likelihood that it does land in their inbox at a good time or better time where they're more likely to respond. My experience is with cold outreach in particular, 3 really seems to be the magic number. I get the vast majority of my responses after the 3rd email. And then the second is trying different angles, because each email trying a different angle, it improves the likelihood of hitting an area where it resonates more with the contact. And I wanted to show you guys in a bit more detail as to what those different angles could look like. So if I start with email angle 1, and you'll see the chronological order makes sense. This is just the quick check-in. So it's a reminder of the service that we provided and when we provided that. This is really getting us back to top of mind of the customer, because it's likely that we provided this service quite a long time ago. In this example, it's over a year ago. And for some contacts, all they need is a reminder of, hey, we're here to help. And the second angle that we try is, after the quick check-in, we try a more educational angle. So with this one, essentially explaining why the problem is important and of relevance to the contact, and adding a sense of urgency as to why they might do this. So here you can see I've used very specific wording in terms of systems that skip their annual tune-up lose about 5% efficiency per year. And then also I'm into light how costly it could be if something goes wrong in this follow-up sentence. I'm just going to correct this here. So yes, I've alluded to potential costs, efficiencies, but then also I've explained savings by going ahead with this offer, the annual tune-up. And third and finally, and it's very intentional that we leave this to the end. So for a lot of customers, it will just be price, and that is the real motivating factor. And there's two things. It's either that the customer thought it was too expensive in the first place to do an annual tune-up, or it creates a sense of, here is a discount, it's not going to last forever. Who doesn't love a discount? So of course, in an ideal world, we don't want to be discounting our services. We'd rather sell them at full price, which is why we try the quick check-in educational angle first, and then have the discount as a last resort. So here we make it very clear that this is going to be the last email from us. We're now running $30 off tune-ups this month. So it's in a sense of urgency by making it clear that the discount's only going to last for the month. And then, yeah, just some more generic, helpful stuff about how we had them in mind. Those are the different angles that I'm trying. So hopefully after seeing all of that, it's clear as to why we try these different angles. So now we want to build our reply handler on GoHighLevel. So now that this workflow is complete, I've pressed back. I'm going to create another workflow, start from scratch. Let's change the name of this to, so I've got here, database reactivation, reply handler, and the trigger this time is going to be, if I scroll further down, customer replied. Now, What's useful about this trigger is we can attach it to a specific workflow. So if I go to add filters and then I can select reply to workflow, and in terms of which workflow, I want it as a response to the first workflow that we built, the HVAC reactivation campaign. And let's make it very clear. So customer replied to G. So if I click save, and we didn't need to change the name because it's already quite clear. Reply to workflow is HVAC reactivation campaign. And then we actually want to use a GPT module. So the action name is going to be GPT classify customer reply. I'm happy with using GPT-5 Mini, as what we're going to use the GPT module for is relatively straightforward. Action type we can leave as custom. And then in terms of the prompt, so I'm going to copy the prompt that I've used before, which is this. Let me extend it. So classify this customer reply into exactly one category. Reply with only the category name with the case matching the below, nothing else. And case matching is important for when we break the workflow down into separate categories of responses. We need the output of this module to match the input required to go down a particular branch of the workflow. So the categories are listed below. Positive, that means they want to proceed, book a service, or shows clear interest. Question, perhaps they've asked us about pricing, availability, what is included, or any other query. Objection, because of course some people might not say no explicitly, but express some concerns, and that could be the price, the timing, etc. They could be not interested, so clearly does not want the service, or stop. And this is really important in terms of meeting outreach regulations, is that within your emails you have an opt-out option, and this is basically what this is covering here. Then we also need to link in what the actual customer reply is. And to do that, as I have done before, so let me show you again, customer reply, add message body. And now we have the variable, which is the body of the message from the reply. Great, so I'm going to click Save Action. Now I want to create a variable which is the reply classification, and that's to help inform which branch the workflow should go down after the fact. So you guys will be familiar with this now, but we're going back. We're going to Settings, Custom Fields, Create Field, Field Name, Reply Classification, folder name, it can go in database reactivation. We want this to be a drop down, single option, and then for the drop down labels we're going to have positive. So this is basically the options that we gave ChatGPT to categorize the response into. Not interested, and stop. Create custom field. Perfect. Now we can go back to the workflow reply handler, and once GPT has responded, we want to update the contact field, select field, reply classification, and we can't select one of these options because we don't know what the GPT has categorized this as, and this would make it this reply classification for every email, which of course we don't want. We want to make this a dynamic field based on the GPT response prior. So to do this, we click the three dots, we go to dynamic, and we add a tag. Scroll down to the GPT module, and we can see these are the options for the GPT modules we've used. Of course, we've only used one. Click that and it is the response. Nice. Now we want an if or else condition. So if or else is, it could be one thing or it could be another in essence. So we've got the action name, condition, build your own, and in terms of the branches, so let's have response is positive, select, reply, classification variable is positive. Now I'll show you for one more branch, so I'm going to add a branch. Let's do response is question, again reply, classification is question, and I'll skip ahead for the other reply classifications. Great, so I've done them now. You can see responses, objection, not interested, stop. Click save. As you can see, we have this none branch, which is basically where none of these conditions are met, i.e. the AI couldn't categorize the response into one of these categories, and that's fine. We can use this branch to escalate the response to one of the team internally, so one of your staff members, for a manual response. Great, so if the response is positive, then it depends on the nature of your business. Some businesses, primary bookings are done over the phone, and you can use an AI caller, but a lot of people prefer personal touch. The other option is, if it's more commonplace in your industry, you have an appointment setting agent or a sequencing of email which basically pushes them towards a booking. Now, in HVAC, a lot of the business is done. Now, let's assume that the business is done over the phone. So the next step I would have here is an send email step. I'm going to change this to email to contact, confirming incoming call from James email, James at TurboMind. I want the subject of the message to be the message subject already, and this should add a RE with the colon for response. So that's good. And then here I'm going to let the contact know that someone from the internal team will give them a call shortly. Great, and now we want to alert the team internally. So it could be a particular person that you assign to basically get on the phone with this contact ASAP to improve the likelihood of actually converting this into a job. So we'll click SMS internal notification to call contact, template, none. And after we send that email, we want to get someone from your team internally to call this contact ASAP while interest is highest. So perhaps that's by SMS, and there is an option to send SMS, but really, because this is to someone internally, the send SMS is generally for someone externally. We want to select that internal notification option, type of notification, SMS, to user, particular user. And I can see that there's no options for me to select a user. So because I'm keeping this bare bones, you can select the notification to go to a particular user, but I'm just going to use all users. I want the SMS to be too long in length, so keeping it snappy, hot lead looking to book, give them a call ASAP. Here's the contact's name, here's their phone number, here's their email for you to refer back to if you need additional context. Perfect. Now this is an SMS internal notification to call contact, and if email is a better way to notify one of your team, then of course change the type of notification to email. Of course, emails tend to be a bit longer, so you can actually send the body of the message using variable tags, as I've shown you guys before, and relay that to the internal team member, give them context, and then they can call the relevant user. To show you guys as well, if email is the way that your team does communications internally and is the best way of getting them on something ASAP, then of course type of notification can be email instead. If you select email, then when you send the message, because emails tend to be a bit longer, or they are longer than text messages, you can provide more context. So perhaps you want to provide the actual email body from the contact's last response, and of course to do that then you would tag the variable as I've shown you guys before. So saving this action, and we are now classing the responses positive flow as complete. Secondly, we have response is question. So if there's a question, particularly if there's common questions, and that could be pricing, dates available, etc., we don't want to burden your team by giving them a heap of more simple questions that they need to go back to and answer, because A, that's long, requires a lot of effort, and B, they might not be able to get back to the contact very quickly because they're not going to prioritize a simple response to a straightforward question that high. So this is where the AI reply handler really comes in and is useful for handling these kinds of common questions. So I'm going to create another GPT module. The action name will be answer question or escalate, if I can spell today. Do GPT-5 mini. Of course, you could just do GPT-5 if you want the full response capabilities, but I'm going to keep it simple and more cheap by using the mini model. And the prompt, I am going to copy and paste. As you can see, this is the prompt I'm using here. So ensure that GPT identifies as a helpful assistant for X business, and I'm making sure that the agent can only respond using the information that I'm providing it with. And I've given a few more instructions: be friendly, concise, professional, etc. But, and this is really important, what if the customer asks a question where the AI agent can't respond? We also need a fallback in order to deal with that. And that's where I've got this reply with exactly escalate and nothing else, if that's the case. You can escalate this to an actual human for a manual response to this more complex question. So here's some of the information I've got about the company. Now, of course, for your guys' business, there'll be a heap more questions and answers. So we'll need to add a lot more context. You can either do that on GoHighLevel, or you can call an external AI tool to have a more structured response and provide more context. But I've provided basic company information here on how much the annual tune-up actually cost, how long the service is, what our business hours are, etc., etc. And again, it's worth noting that you need to actually provide GPT with what the customer's response is. You can't just expect it to know. And I've used the tag message body to include that here. Now, this is a simple call to action at the end, but again, this is very bare bones. You could flesh this out massively and make it a lot more structured and able to handle more of a variety of responses, and also add some additional sequencing as well. So saving that, and now there is a need for another if-else condition. So branch 1 will have it being labeled as contains Escalate, and we want to select the GPT module. So previously when we looked at it, we only had one option, but now we've used GPT twice. So we want the second one, answer question or escalate. And as you can see, guys, this is where it's really important for labeling. It was very clear out of these two options which is relevant to me. Whereas if it just had number 1 GPT, number 2 GPT, you need to go back and look as to which one's relevant. So select operator, we want contains escalate. And then for the none branch, we can change this to question answered, i.e. it didn't include escalate. And there we have our two branches. Then if it contains escalate, so answering a question is less of a priority than a hot lead coming through. So I'm going to avoid the SMS internal notification, but let's say we email this instead. So email notification to email internal notification to answer contact question. Type of notification, email from James mine to user, all users, but again, ideally you'd have a particular user assigned to each contact. The subject can be this. Here's the body that I'd like included. So contact name, that's first name, last name, has replied to the reactivation email with a question that needs a human response. Here's the question, here's details about the contact for additional context. So they don't need to, so your internal staff doesn't need to log into GoHighLevel and find out all this information themselves. Great. And then if the question has been answered, then we need to relay that GPT response or that AI agent response to the contacts themselves. So I'm going to send email to contact answering question from James at TurboMind, subject, message, body, name, ChatGPT 2 response, and just to show you guys, add in tag, GPT, answer question, response. And it's definitely worth previewing the response. And you can do that by scrolling to the bottom, sending a test email to an inbox of your choice. Because one thing I want to make sure is, does this email say, hi, Harry, and then go on to say, hi again? I don't want it to say that twice. So the ChatGPT response might have a hi at the start of it, for example. So I'm going to save that. And great, that is the second flow done. And great, that is the second branch done. Now the objection workflow is very similar to the responses question, but instead you'd copy all the actions from here, and I'm just going to show you high level and not do the whole thing, because I think you guys can do this in your own time. So instead of this answer question, it would be answer objection or escalate. You are helpful assistant, and in the prompt you would basically include common objections that you'd expect and what the responses should be. Then when we get to the condition part, it's again contains escalate if, and then this should be variable 3 contains, or variable 3 ChatGPT contains escalate, and then this would be objection unanswered, and this is when objection answered, when the GPT response doesn't contain escalate and the objection's been handled fine. And again, you would email the team internally if escalate is the response from the GPT module, or you would automatically email the contact directly if GPT is able to handle that objection. Now, responses not interested is fairly simple. What we want to do is just send a courteous email to the contact. Let me quickly rattle through these. subject. We want this to be the message subject. And just acknowledging that they weren't interested, but reminding them that we're available if they need us later down the line. So on top of that, we want to remove the tag, and that is that the reactivation sequence is still active. Responses stop. We don't want to send anything. We can just remove the reactivation sequence active tag, but then on top of that we want to add another tag, which we've got here, because now they've opted out. We can't just include them in future reactivation campaigns, marketing, etc. This is it. They've broken up with us, so reactivation opted out. And then none when none of the conditions are met. So we basically don't know what the AI has seen. So we need to email our team internally, and all of this can stay the same except this bit here, which I'll just change. So contact name replied to reactivation email, which the AI couldn't categorize. Here's the response. Here's some additional context about the contact themselves. Perfect. So there you guys have it, which for step 1 was an automated follow-up sequence to all your past contacts. And step 2 is an automated reply handler, which has a built-in function where anything that the AI can't handle, it can escalate to a human as necessary. So in order to get your automation working, you're going to need to publish the automations themselves, and that's in the top right here. So I'm just going to turn publish on, save, and likewise with the reply handler, do the same thing now that it's complete. And now our workflow is active. So once the tags are added, once the workflows are triggered, the responses can now happen automatically off the back of that. And I'll show you guys an example of the automation working in practice and what your conversations could actually look like, and how you can actually win back these jobs from your past contacts. So if we go back to the workflow and pay specific attention to the follow-up sequence workflow, we can see that in order to trigger the workflow, 2 things need to be true in terms of tagging. 1, last service performed is annual tune-up. And then secondly, reactivation status is sequence active. So I've taken you to this tab for one of the contacts, Harry Potter, because we have a function in email. And if I scroll further down, I can see that the last service performed was annual tune-up. So that's one of the 2 required tags in order to trigger the follow-up sequence workflow. But one of the other tags that's missing to make the 2 of 2 is reactivation sequence active. And as soon as I've clicked that, you can now see that this message has popped up here. This has been sent via email to Harry. So, hi Harry, hope you're doing well. Just going through our records and noticed we last did an annual tune-up back in X date. Just wanted to check to see if everything's still running okay. Yada, yada, yada. And you can see it's got the unsubscribe function here, which can be clicked on. Now, just to confirm that this has actually gone to the email, if I go to Harry's inbox, again, we can see that same message has come through here. So I'll keep the focus on the conversation section of the contacts because it's quite easy for you guys to follow. Now, using Harry's email, I've responded manually to say that my system seems to be running less efficiently. How much would an annual tune-up cost? And within just a few minutes, where interest is highest, we can see our other workflow, the reply handler, has actually answered Harry's question and come back to him here. So I've seen it says, hi Harry, and then hi, thanks for reaching out. So I've just made a quick tweak to say, do not include hi, thanks for reaching out message or equivalent in the reply, as that will be covered separately. Save. So let's try this workflow again. So in order to trigger it again, I can simply remove the tag, both tags, and add them back. There we go. And as we can see, instantly the message has been sent. So going to reply. So as you can see, the response has come through. The system seems to be running less efficiently. It's the same as the last one. How much would an annual tune-up cost? And now we wait for the second workflow, the reply handler, to trigger its response. And there we go. It's done it within a minute. So interest is highest. The customer's getting a response really quick. Of course, you can delay the timing of sending this email if you want it to seem a bit more natural in terms of how much time it would take a human to generate a response like this. If I click on it, hi Harry, we're removing now the repetition of hi, thanks for reaching out. An annual tune-up is $149 for the standard service and $189 for the premium service. Standard tune-up includes etc. And then service takes approximately an hour. Here are some alternative plans if you want to do annual tune-ups to maintain for the longer term. How is that a more discounted rate? And then the call to action is, would you like me to get you booked in? Prompting the contact or the customer, in this case, to book back on with you and actually generate some revenue again. This is a simple but really powerful automation which can generate revenue from your past contacts. You can avoid needing to spend money on ads or trying to attract new customers, which a lot of businesses do, and actually bring back to the top of mind some of the people who already know your name, have already worked with you in the past, and are a lot easier to convert. You can get a lot more complex in this automation in terms of how you want it to operate. It can handle responses in a particular way. One of the potential improvements that I would have done just by looking at this is actually in the first message itself on reflection. So we go through and we say, I was going through our records and noticed we last did an annual tune-up. Perhaps I've removed the capitalization. But what I would do to improve this workflow is actually quote the system that the contact has implemented with us in the past. So it would say, I was going through our records and noticed we last did an annual tune-up on X system back in January 9th, 2024. And that added degree of personalization, specificity to what the customer actually did with us, all improves the likelihood of them actually responding and feeling like we're reaching out and understanding exactly what their problem might be and how we can specifically help. Hope you guys found that useful. Feel free to drop any questions that you might have in the comments. And of course, please like and subscribe. And as I mentioned before, if you want the full template for this GoHighLevel build, then comment the word database below and I'll send it across. Cheers.